Hello everyone, it's Bella, and today's video is extremely difficult for me to make, and yet the voices in my head are so loud and clear that I can't ignore them. And I want to speak to everything that's happening, not from a perspective of any political agendas or taking any sides, but from a perspective of what I believe, as someone that has lived through wars and someone that's always had that backdrop of war, conflict in a collective field, and I perceive and capture that, unfortunately, way too clearly and strongly. And as an individual, as someone that's been trying to heal her trauma, I truly believe that war is an end result of this war consciousness that we all carry inside of us. And every conflict that we see, from the tiniest little argument you might have with your loved ones to these horrendous situations and conflicts that we're seeing in the Middle East, they are all an opportunity for us to choose differently, because we can. To look at our core wounds and to try to heal them. To get out of the reactivity, because the key to any kind of spiritual development, any kind of personal development, is getting out of reactivity. When you're feeling the strong emotions, it's an opportunity for you to heal something internally, heal this core wound that's been repeating itself over and over. And the only way we'll go towards peace is if we heal our collective consciousness individually. If we start looking at where we are being contributors to the conflict, and guess what? All of us are. It's whenever you take a side, whenever you want to retaliate, whenever you want to show that the other is wrong, whenever you are within that conflict, when you're reactive within the conflict, you're part of the conflict. The only time where you really are taking steps towards peace is if you step away from the conflict, if you take steps towards peace. And it might be a tiniest little step in your community, in your ability to see the other as a human being, instead of perpetuating this. And unfortunately, humanity is escalating this to a level where we are being forced to take sides, and we're being forced to hate each other with everything that's happening, and we rightfully get angry, sad, and we want to retaliate, and we want to show the other side how wrong they were. If we get into that reactive mentality on a surface level, it's never going to resolve anything. We all know, when has war ever solved any problems? And yet we don't learn from that. When has killing someone resulted in less killings? When has being within conflict and acting out of conflict ever resolved a problem? It's not going to happen. War is not going to get us closer to peace ever. Securing our frontiers, or having stronger army, killing the other side off completely is not going to solve the problem, because if we don't address the underlying issues of why conflict arises in the first place, there will be other people who will become the bad guys. So if we don't address the underlying issues of everything that's happening, this pattern will keep repeating itself. That's from a very, from a perspective of what's happening on a surface. But from a spiritual perspective, and from a perspective, if you're on a healing journey, the only way to really deal with this kind of situations is to really separate yourself from the need to be reactive, whether it be within the conflict, whether it be becoming really emotional on social media about whatever it is that you're emotional about, and in making judgments, immediate judgments. And it's so easy these days to make judgments against the other side and, blaming the leaders or whoever it is that we're pointing the finger towards. And yet, the only way we'll ever have a chance at peace is if we learn that there is no other. The conflict is within us. And talking about spiritual perspective here, okay? Like, there's no justification for violence ever. But violence is part of our collective consciousness. It's part of our reality still. And the violence, if you ever are to see yourself going towards peace on the outside, you have to first look inside and say, where do I carry this consciousness of war inside of me, and where can I resolve it? And it's really, really difficult when you have generations and generations of, layers of this hatred growing in you, and this resentment, and you're either in a victim role or you're in an aggressor role. It's really difficult to get out of that, especially with all the propaganda that's happening from both sides. And it all repeats. History repeats itself, and we don't see the patterns, guys. It's happening everywhere. It's not just Israel and Palestine. In Armenia, Azerbaijan, it's the same thing. The propaganda that's going on, they make us see each other as non-human. So the first step is empathy. You have to understand that the other is also a human being and is also suffering. And if they've reached this level of escalation, which is not justified in any case, I repeat that, then there's something underlying that needs to be resolved. So the first step in preventing any conflict is in addressing the root causes of this conflict. We see violence everywhere. It's not just in wars. In the Middle East, it's mostly wars. In the US, it's school shootings. And in Brazil, it's the gang violence in the slum. It's so clear that addressing it head on with violence is never going to be the solution. We have to treat, at least like in the US, I feel like there's a consensus that now we have to address the mental health problem in order to reduce the violence in schools, aside from obviously reducing the access to guns, which, by the way, is a huge issue also in the conflict right now. Where are all the arms coming from, and why is the industry, the warfare is so present there? It's because that's a business. So unfortunately, money is always behind it. Follow the money and you will see why the conflict starts. It's not all about territorial conflict. It's an industry. It's a really powerful war industry. And we only see the surface of it. And we actually get thrown into this emotional, the pictures that we see and everything. And then we're forced to take sides, and especially with social media, it's horrible. Like, if you are Jewish, all you're seeing is, Jewish kids and civilians being killed. If you're Palestinian, then you're seeing only the Palestinians being butchered and the bombs falling on the civilian buildings. And guess what? Both of these realities are coexisting, and they're suffering on both sides. And the only way we'll ever resolve this conflict is if we start seeing the other as the human being as well. You might disagree with the politics of one country, you might disagree with a group that's terrorizing each other, but that doesn't make you less responsible in looking at the other and seeing a human being. Because we all are human beings and we all deserve to live in peace. And given the basic rights at security, at exercising our health and well-being, and having some of the basics covered. And if some of the groups are treated with they're treated as less important, they're not given their basic rights, guess what? They will revolt at some point. All three of our religions, we're like killing each other off in our region, all of us share the Old Testament, or whatever you call it in your religion, the story is the same, and we all believe in it, that when Noah descended, and by the way, he descended on Mount Ararat, which used to be in Armenia and now is in Turkey, he had 3 sons. There were Ham, Shem, and Samet. And when they went their different ways, one gave rise to all the Arabs, one gave rise to all the Jews, and the other gave rise to all the Armenians that eventually became the Aryans and the Europeans. When you think about the conflict that's happening now, realize that this is a lineage of from your brothers, from your sisters. Same thing I say to my people. We are brothers and sisters. And, you know, if you have certain situations in your family where you can't talk to your family members because they're wrong and you're right, it's the same parallel that we can draw. Like, we take these family situations and we blow them out of proportion, and then it keeps going on, and then the feud really grows stronger, and now we find ourselves in a world that's fully divided, but in reality we're all related and we're all the same, and we all have the right to exercise our freedom to live in peace, in harmony, and have access to health and well-being. That's the message that I have, and it might make some of you very angry that I'm not taking a side, and I'm not, but for me, the side that I'm taking is the side of humanity and our need to really look at these patterns that we've been repeating and just stop and understand that retaliation and escalating this is not the way to peace. It never was, it never will be. And if we're ever to come closer to peace, we have to look inside of us and see where we hold conflict, see the other as a human being, and really go into prevention, into understanding why conflicts arise in the first place. Try not to, this is like my big recommendation to you, try not to be on social media watching this stuff all the time, because your brain really doesn't know the difference between the images that are somewhere out there or your reality. So when you see this actually becomes part of your chemistry and you're living the war. And that doesn't contribute to, you're not being more compassionate by watching it, you're not being more helpful, on the contrary. This is done with a purpose of getting you into that lower vibration, into that vibration of anger, frustration, and war. And if, as a collective, we are all bullied into that space of anger and hatred, then we don't have a chance. And you have a choice of creating peace within you, within your family, within your community, and contributing to a different reality. We all do.